3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so first things first, when I like to sculpt in matte cap. That's like that orange color. So if you go here to this little sun, you'll see by default you're being lit PBR, and just jump to matte cap. And I like to use this one. I think it's PXG clay. It just makes it easier to see what's going on. Also, make sure you go over here to this little camera and be in orthographic, so you don't have any perspective distortion. So I like to add a sphere and hit front. And this sphere is what we'll use as the teacup body. So let's take a look at some teacups. So here we have, or teapots, I should say. So here's some teapots. They're very cute. I really like this one. I really like these. So it's kind of like fat and round, and has a little lip here, spout and handle. So pretty simple. And they all pretty much look the same, so that's what we're gonna do. All right, so we have the first part done. Let's go ahead and rename this. So you tap the scene here and rename this to these 3 little dots. And we'll make this teapot. So that's our teapot. So once you add a shape in here from the scene menu, when you hit add, you have all these shapes that you can add. They're not technically part of the project until you validate them. And it's very confusing, not to go too much into it, but there's some other things you can do to the shapes before you make them official part of your project. But then once you hit validate, now they're a part of your project, and all your tools will open up over here, all your sculpting tools. So the main part is the gizmo, and that is right here. That's this little red, blue, and green thing. And the gizmo just helps you move everything around. So the arrow up and down, and obviously when you turn it, you see the blue arrow, red arrow. These rings, you have a blue ring, so these all spin it on its axis. And by on axis, I just mean like the point in the very middle. That's always the axis. So in case anyone here like on axis, that just means like the middle stays the same and everything else moves. So for example, with your arm, your elbow would be like your axis, because the elbow never moves. Your arm moves, but the elbow stays where it is. Okay, so so the green, those little spheres, they stretch it. Pretty simple. But I like to keep everything in the middle. I don't usually move my models when I'm starting. I like to keep it right in the center, because this center of the whole project, that's your world center. And this red line, that's the symmetry line that's going down the center. So you can go to this little symmetry option and go down. I always have show line on. That way I can see where my symmetry line is. And you'll notice, so if I was to take this sphere and move it left and right, you can see how the symmetry line just stays in the same place. Nomad's been through a bunch of options. There's lots of differences now with this target, you know, and see now I move it and now it stays there. So it can be very confusing. For now, I'm just gonna leave it on vertex. Or you know what, better yet, let's leave it on auto. That way you guys can be, you know, with me. Anything that I do, the same thing will happen with yours. So we'll just leave it on auto. Or I guess auto is group. Fine. So first things first, let's trim the bottom to make our teapot. So we'll use the trim, and these are all your trim tools. Obviously lasso is like this. I have symmetry on, that's why anything happens over here. This is the center, and these are symmetrical. So that's with symmetry on. If it's off, then it's just one side. So we'll leave it on for now. So let's use the rectangle, and let's just trim the bottom. And this works pretty simply. You just make a rectangle of any shape, go like this, and trims the bottom. And it might be a little too fat, so you can take the gizmo and maybe we'll squash it. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I think that's nice. And you'll notice this is really ugly here. Like that looks really, the edges look really bad. And even though like the teapot, when we cut it, it remeshed it. So what remeshing is it just reorganizes everything that makes up your sculpt. So there's like the outside of it, there's the inside, it's all shapes. So if we turn on the wireframe, we can kind of see that these are all like faces. Each one of these little squares. You see, this is crazy. See how dirty that looks? And it's very not uniform. So there's 34.5 thousand of them. But even if you remesh them, it doesn't really, like, it just reorganizes all of this. So it'll probably get bigger when we remesh it. But it will reorganize this ugly edge and make things nicer. So long story short, which is already a long story, but remeshing just reorganizes the polygons and everything in your model. So to do that, go here. You see all these options, voxel, and that's a voxel remesh. And you can do the resolution too. So we'll just leave it at, we'll do it like 150. And you can see the squares get bigger and smaller. So we'll do it around 150. And then we'll remesh. You can see it's much more even. Even though everything got smaller, it's much more even, much cleaner. So we'll turn the wireframe off. And that's pretty good. And you might see these little like squares. They looks like a grid. So sometimes those appear. You can use smooth to smooth those out. So you can take the smooth tool. I still have symmetry on, and you can smooth those out if you don't like them, or you can just like leave them and then smooth it all out later on. Okay. So now let's use trim, and let's trim the top as well. So we're using trim, rectangle, and we'll just trim the top as well, something like that. And that looks pretty good for our little teapot. Also, I notice I use this a lot. That's how I know that I'm in the direct front, and you can move this, you can move your model around with this little thing. Okay, so next, one of my favorite tools, the Lathe tool. So you can tap the Lathe tool, and you have path or curve. And to make it really simple, the Lathe tool is great for making bowls and cups and things like that, and anything that's that sort of shape. So if I was using path and I wanted to make a bowl, I would start on this orange line. You just start at the line, and let's say you want a flat bottom, so I make the bottom part. And this is how you use path. You put one line and you go like this, take it off. One, go like this, take it off, and so on and so forth. But you have to remember, when you use the lathe, if you just go straight back to the line, it's going to be a ball. So you kind of have to make the inner wall of your bowl like this. So now it's going to take this shape and just wrap it all around in a circle, in a circular fashion. So when I hit this, then it makes a bowl. And of course you have these, so you can edit them if you want. You can make it thinner. And you can do things like, if you want this to be pointy, you can tap that, and then it gives it like a sharp edge. So you can make some really cool stuff. Okay, so we'll go back to Lathe. And if you want to do curve, curve is just a little bit more simple. If you want to do more, you know, crazy looking objects, curve just allows you to do that. But it just has a lot more of those nodes too. All right, so let's do path. Let's tap path again so we can start a new one. I'm going to try to line this up with this. I'm going to hit front. And the reason why I line it up is just so we can generally see how the top of our teapot's going to look. So we're using lathe, path. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to go out. I feel like my screen just got darker. So I'm going to go out to the end. And then I can leave it, and then I can start again right here. Let's say, got to be careful not to get too close to another node. So we'll start up here. So that looks nice. Maybe I want a nice curved top and then like a little ball type thing. Now we don't want it to be a bowl, so that's why I can just go back to this orange line. And you see, this is just like one piece of the top. We go like this, and then we have, you know, a nice looking teapot top. It's not in the right place, but we'll fix that in a minute. All right, so let's see how we want this to look. Let's bring this up a little bit. I'm gonna tap this so it's kind of a little bit more straight. Right front, that looks pretty good, but I might want to add a little flavor to the top part, so maybe I'll touch it there. Maybe I'll try to make this part a little bit more round. But as you can see, there's a ton of stuff that you can do, and it's, you know, it's pretty fun making shapes like this, I think. We'll bring that in a little bit. And if you wanted to do something like add like a lip, you know, you could do something like that too. And you can get really, really detailed, you know, if you want it to be a hard line, things like that. But I think I just like regular, round, simple. Yeah, so I think I like something like that. So I want it to be, first let's validate it. Now it's an official part, but I want it to be right in the center. Everything you add to your scene, like if I add a shape, if I add a cylinder, it's going to be in world center. Notice that it covers the initial sphere that I made. So world center is great. I'm going to tap on this, tap on Gizmo, tap the options, and you can move origin, and that just moves that shape to world center. So now I know, I'll just tilt it so you can see, when I bring it straight up, it's going to be exactly straight on top of the teapot. I think that looks good. I love these shapes. I think that looks great. And of course, if you need to, you can make it smaller or bigger. You can still squash it and stuff like that. So you still have a lot of freedom of how you want to move it. But I think that looks pretty good. And let's do a shortcut. So let's say we want to make another lip on the bottom that we didn't make when we made, since we didn't use the lathe to make the sphere. Let's just use a torus. So let's go here, we'll add, and we'll do a torus, and the Gizmo, and we'll bring it down. So the torus is just a ring. And I'm gonna hit solo just so you can kind of see. And there's a lot of options. See how you have Gizmo here. If you press that, then you have these little nodes. So the pink one opens it up like that. So if you wanted half. This one I think just makes it look more like a donut, or more like a thin ring. And this is just your overall scale. So there's lots of options. And obviously there's hole. So if you tap hole and then you open it, you see it's like a tube. So that's hole. So let's go back to the beginning, and I'm going to hit solo again. Oops. Okay, so let's hit Gizmo, and let's kind of shrink it to it's around where we want. But it's still a little bit too thick, so I'm going to tap Gizmo to bring those other options back. And let's make it thinner. Maybe something like that. Hit Gizmo again. And we'll just move it up. Maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe a little bit taller. Yeah, I think I like that. And you can make it, you can adjust it and make it, a little bit thicker, bigger, wherever you want to do it. But I think that looks pretty good. I like that. Okay, so now the only thing we have left to do is the handle and the spout. So for that, I'm going to use the tube tool. Let me just readjust this, make sure it's nice and bright and you can see what I'm doing. So the tube tool. So we have path and curve again. So I'm going to use path. And I'm going to essentially just make a handle. So path works the same way. Touchdown, slide, touchdown, slide, touchdown, slide, touchdown, slide, touchdown, slide, touchdown, slide. So it looks like a decent handle. So we'll bring it into fruition, bring it to fruition, bring it to life. I don't know. So I'm going to hit path again. so that we can make another one, and this one would be the spout. So I'm thinking maybe it starts there, maybe it's kind of angled off, goes down, and then maybe one last one here. So then we'll bring it into life. Okay, so I'm gonna hit right, and you can see that this is way off, and I don't actually know how to make it so it's like straight, so I'm just gonna move it manually with the gizmo. So I'm just gonna move it over till it's right in the middle. It looks a bit better. I think the handle's a bit off too, so I just tap left, tap on the handle, and I'll move this over as well. So now that's right in the middle. Okay, so now we're in the gizmo, but you can go back to this tube, and that brings back the tube options. So you can still sort of adjust these tubes. So first, I'm going to tap on each one and do spline. That makes them nice and curvy. So that's spline. So now we have radius. So radius by default is just one node. It makes the whole thing bigger. Tap radius again, and then there's two nodes, and now you can make one side bigger or smaller. Which is what we want for here. So let's make it bigger, and let's move this node more into our bowl. Maybe we'll pull this out. So maybe something like this. Looks pretty good. And then you can tap radius again, and then you can adjust each one. So let's say if we wanted it thinner, but we want the bottom one thicker. So you can adjust each one. So this looks pretty good, I think. I think this looks believable as a spout. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So now the back, and this doesn't have to be, this can be kind of simple. So I'm just gonna add another node here just to give it a nice shape like that. We already hit spline. So radius, I'm gonna tap it 3 times so I can just adjust each node placement or point. So at the bottom, when it hits where it makes contact with the teapot, I want to make that bigger. Maybe even this a little bigger as well. Okay, and I want to do the same thing to the top. I do this when I'm doing like legs, like if I'm making a character. Oops. If I'm doing a character and I make legs for him, going into like a round body or something like that, I make the part where it goes into the body bigger, because usually things are designed that way. They're a little stronger at those places. Okay, that looks pretty good. You can use the gizmo, remember, if you want maybe the whole thing to be bigger or something like that. You can still use these options as well. I do want it a bit wider. Let's see if I can just make it wider like this. Yeah, it's pretty good. Let's make this wider as well. So right now I'm just using the gizmo. Oh, you know what? I'm seeing that this looks a bit off. So this is actually a good thing to show you. So remember, this tube is not exactly perfectly straight. So you have to be careful. I just want to make it wide, but it's not perfectly straight. So if I make it wide, it's not going to be straight. So I'm going to do pivot. And what's really nice is you can manually adjust this pivot. So I'm going to manually adjust with these rings, because I know I've hit right, so I know that this is facing towards me perfectly. So now I'm just going to line the gizmo up so it's like perfectly straight, and I'm going to line it up with this. And that's probably as perfect as I'm going to get. I hit pivot again. So now when I move it, you know, it may not be perfect, but it's a little bit closer than it would have been. And I'd also like the front part to be a little wider maybe. I don't know why. I don't know if it would really look like that. So let's tap tube so I get these options again. And maybe I'll add another node and then maybe make this a little bit wider. Okay. Maybe even a little more. And you can make that little, you can make this smaller if you want. Yeah, maybe something like that. I think that works. So once you're happy with your shapes, you can go ahead and validate. I'll validate that. You can take this one and you can validate it. And these look pretty good. So next, now for this spout, I think this part is actually straight. So that was another thing I wanted to do. So I'm going to go to trim. I'm going to use rectangle. I think I just want to cut this. Oop. Make sure that you're on the right shape. Oh, you know what else I didn't do that I should have done? So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to right before I validated them. Okay. And I'm going to add a hole. So I add hole. And I think this blue, we can make it thicker or less thick. So maybe something like that. So now at least there's a hole there. So now we can go ahead and validate. I meant to do that earlier. So now let's hit front again. And now let's see when we trim, let's see what we get. That's not bad. But maybe we can do better. So let's use line. Maybe we just want to trim like that. Yeah, I think that looks better. And remember, this got really ugly, so I'm going to go ahead and first let's save, because I don't think I've saved it all. I'm going to rename it to Teapot Crash Course. Okay. Make sure you save often, especially before you voxel remesh things. So I'm just using a shortcut down here, but it's the exact same as going up here and going to voxel and going to remesh. So this is just a shortcut. And yeah, we'll do it at 150. That looks decent, but you notice there's a lot of like those little things. So that's because there wasn't enough geometry when we first validated. It gets confusing, but when you see them, there's a few things you can do. You can try to remesh higher, but they're still there. So go here, multi-res, subdivide it. So that's adding more squares. It's not changing anything, it's just adding, it's taking all those squares and making like 4 squares out of 1 square. So we just subdivided all of that. Oops. We subdivided, whoops, I keep accidentally hit. We subdivided all of this. So maybe I can show you actually. So if we go here and we go subdivide, see, it's subdivided all those squares. But now we want to voxel remesh it. Let's voxel remesh it at 200 and see if all those little squares have gone away. So let's turn off the wireframe. And yeah, so they're a little bit smaller, but they're still there somewhat. And make sure you check out my round edge tool. I keep wanting to use it, but I don't want to really go into it too much, because if you're new, then I don't want to confuse you any more than I have to. So in other words, just use the smooth tool, and you can just smooth it out. But just be careful, because it might be a little bit malleable. So if you smooth it too much, it might change the shapes too much. See how thin that made it? I mean, actually it doesn't look bad, but it is a little thin. But you can always like trim it again too. It starts to look too weird. That looks nice. And that's just kind of the way that you have to think about this stuff. Like sometimes you have to just kind of figure out how to make things look good. Okay, so all this is looking great, but the pot, the handle and this can be the same color. So this can all be the same piece. So, oh, and there's another thing that I can show you while we're here. Let's hit solo. So let's say you wanted this to be hollow inside. Maybe you want to put like a character inside. And here's a way that you can do that. So first, let's add, we should label all these things. Let's add a cylinder. So let's use Gizmo. We can validate it. Let's use Gizmo and let's make the cylinder like the opening. So let's say you want the opening like that wide. So that's good for the opening. So let's say that you want to hollow everything out. We can hide the cylinder for now. We have our opening. Let's just take this shape go here and clone it and just rename it with an X. Take the cylinder and rename it cylinder X. The reason why I put X is because we're going to use these shapes to extract out of the teapot. So we'll hide the cylinder, we'll take teapot X. Let's go to the regular teapot, go here, and go to blending, and you can turn that down and see how the teapot sort of gets a little bit more invisible. So we can go back to the teapot X, and now we can make it smaller. Whoops, I forgot I'm on solo, so I have to select them both. Let's just get out of solo. So you see the teapot X, see how we're inside of that now? So now I'm inside, we've shrunk it. So now we can extract that whole shape of the inner teapot, we can extract it from the big teapot. But you have to remember to go back to the big teapot, this one, and just put it back to opaque. So now we have teapot X that's smaller inside. We have the cylinder, which is sticking out the top. So we can select all of them. And then whatever we want to cut away, whatever we want to extract, make those invisible. So now those are invisible. If you have problems with this, if you keep touching it and they won't turn off or they all turn off, just go to advanced and uncheck these. So what we're doing is a Boolean operation. So we're taking one shape and extracting it from another. So that's all we're doing. And all you do is select all of those, hide the ones you want to extract. I'm going to do a quick save in case I get a crash. And then you just voxel remesh all of those together. The original teapot, teapot X, cylinder X, but these are hidden. So let's voxel remesh at, we'll do 250. Actually, we'll do 200. 200, voxel merge. So now when we take the top off, it's hollow inside. And obviously you'd have to deal with this stuff as well. You can probably take like trim, the lasso. You can probably just cut this piece. See, you got rid of that. And you could do the same thing with this as well, but not a big deal. But since we're here, since we're lassoing, let's go ahead and trim it. There you go. So yeah, so now it's hollow. So let's put the top back down. Actually, we can leave the top up for now. Looks nice. But let's take all these and group them together. So now we have the lathe, which is the lid, teapot lid. You have the torus, that's the bottom part, the tube, so this is the handle. And this is the spout, but let's put all these together. So let's take the handle, the spout, and the teapot, and let's just voxel remesh them together at 200. So now they're all one piece. So now you can take your smooth, and you can also add this too if you want, unless you think you want to make it a different color. All right, so now we're on this, and see this red line? It would actually be nice, the symmetry would be nice if it's the opposite way. So you can always change which symmetry is active. So we have symmetry here, and we have the X, we have the green, that's the top and the bottom. But now we have blue, so now it's like left and right. So now when we use smooth and symmetry, you know, we can smooth here, and it's also going to smooth the other side, so it just saves us like half the work. There we go. So we can smooth this to make it look nice and clean. And we can smooth some of the edges. Hopefully this starts to look a little bit better. Looks a little bit crazy. Might have to trim it again. Let's see. If we trim it, it looks a bit better. Okay, so now we have the top. Let's put the top back on. Like like so. I think that looks great. Let's just add a nice little, we'll add a cylinder and we'll just make it smaller. We can go ahead and validate it. Let's make it bigger. Squash it. And we'll put it right on the bottom, like so. And if you did my other video where I make rounded edge, it's only like, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, then you can use rounded edge and you can round this out and make it nice and round if you want. I've also remesh this thing. Okay, so now it's nice and round. If not, just leave it as a regular cylinder, no big deal. So now we have everything done. It's almost ready for our kitchen. I'm gonna hit save. And lastly, we can just go from matte cap, so we're in the little sun, go from matte cap to lit PBR. And now we have this. And this is my custom environment. You can use any one you want. It always changes the environment look. So now it looks nice. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on post-process. And there's some options here. You can stick with none. I have one that I use all the time. So, but you don't have to bring all this up. I just want to make it put all the bells and whistles up so you can see what it looks like. So this looks great. We'll turn the environment off for now. So we're back into the lighting. We'll turn on a light. We'll increase it a little bit, like that. I like to do the options. I like soft shadows. I'm a soft shadow guy. So we have one light here, and we'll just add another one, and maybe let's use our gizmo. And even though we're using the sun, so it doesn't really matter where you place these, all that matters is how you rotate them. So let's just rotate this so that it's hitting the teapot from a different place. So maybe like this. It's good for now. We don't really need too much more. I think that's good. Oh, let's turn it down though. Let's turn the intensity down on that one. Okay. So now let's just change the materials. So we have the teapot, the lid, and the cylinder. Oh, the torus. Let's validate the torus and let's bring it up. So now we can take all of those at the same time. You can color it with this crossed out sphere. So we tap that, move the color around. You can make it any color you want. I feel like I want it like a turquoise, like a rich turquoise. But I'm going to turn the roughness down so it's nice and glossy. So paint all like that. Oh yeah, that's glossy too. Looked like it wasn't glossy. Just make sure everything's the right color. And yeah, and you can even, if you wanted to change the bottom, maybe make it a more metallic color, you can always tap here and they have some pre-made colors that you can use. When I use that silver type, I always usually bring the roughness up or else it looks funny. So it could be something like that. But maybe it just looks good as blue as well. But yeah, but that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how you do it. And as you can see with those lathe tools, you know, it's really fun to make all sorts of different kinds of things. And if you're worried about the size, or if you don't want it to be this big, you can always go to each shape and then go here. Remember where the voxel is, but go to misc. Then you can decimate. So this will bring down the size of each thing, but just be careful because it also can affect the quality. So if I choose this 104K, I go here, miscellaneous, and decimate. You just have to be careful because this can be affected. So you just want to be careful how low you make things, and it's a balancing act, and you'll just get better with it over time. Torus, that's fine. We might be able to decimate it once or twice, not too much of an issue, and you can bring the size down. And let's say you want to use this in another thing, like you want to use it in a different application, like I do. And first I'm going to do something If you have round edge, what you can do, so what I'm going to do with this teapot, I'm going to voxel remesh it quite high. So I voxel remeshed it quite high. I'm going to use round edge. So once you do that tutorial and you have round edge, you can do this. And now I should be able to decimate it more. And it should maintain a little bit more of those edges. So now it's only 10,000 and it still looks pretty good. So that's another trick that I do with round edge. So make sure you check out that video. I'll link it after this one. So if you want to use this in a different scene, let's go ahead and nestle these underneath the teapot. So you select all of them. I'm going to go here to this little folder. I'll do a quick save. Then I'll go down and let's export it as, we'll use GLTF. That way if I ever want to bring it to Blender, I can just bring it over. But normally I would do a Nomad file. You know what, let's do a Nomad file. And now just save it wherever you want it. Oh, but make sure that you tap only include selected objects, so only these three. So it's not going to bring over this thing. So just remember this checkbox, because sometimes I always forget and I bring over stuff I don't want, or vice versa. So we export Nomad, save to files, Teapot crash course, and I'm going to save it to my assets. Do I have like kitchen stuff? I'll save it in foods. Save, so now I know where it is. And this is saved. I'm gonna uncheck this now. So now when we go back to our kitchen, so here's our kitchen. I'll turn on the bells and whistles for you. I'll turn the environment off. So here's our kitchen. I know it's dark. We'll turn the environment on, but we'll turn it down. Okay, so here's our kitchen. So we just go to here, import, add to scene, import new file, assets, food, and Teapot crash course, open. It's going to open at world center. So now we can bring it up. Bring it over to our oven. It's a little big, as you can see, so we'll shrink it. A little shrinky poo. And also, let's just spin it some. I feel like it should be like this. I'm gonna hit align. That way the gizmo is aligned with the world project and not the teapot. So if you notice, like it's always, no matter what I do, that blue is always going to be pointing that way. Whereas if I take it off of align, it's just aligned to the teapot. So align is very useful because I just want to place it on the stove. So I don't care. I've already got the direction of the teapot. I just need to line it up with the stove. And let me go back to, I might be on orthographic. Yeah, let me go back to orthographic just so I can see everything better. And I'll place it perfectly on the stove, down just a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Whoop, except it's not. Whoop. The gizmo is tricky. There's all these other things that get in the way when you're trying to move something. But unfortunately, that's just how it is. Yeah, so now it's on the stove. And now there's a teapot for our little stove. And, you know, that's why I made everything in the scene. Everything in the scene is just made one by one. Slowly, one by one, and you place it in. And then you have a new piece for your scene. So I'll save. And there you go. All right, hopefully that crash course was helpful. Hopefully you make some nice teapots and bowls and cups and all that good stuff. All right, keep drawing, keep sculpting. I'll see you all